Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, and the fellowship. Today is going to be a very special episode because we are going to have a special guest. Jake Merrick, a gubernatorial candidate from our state here in Oklahoma, is going to be with us, and we're going to ask him questions, and I think it's going to be a fun time. Now, I will note, I am using an earpiece and it's echoing in my ear, so if my cadence, if my manner of speech sounds a little bit different, it's because I'm hearing myself delayed by about half a second. And it's kind of driving me crazy, but I'm going to hang in there, all right? We're going to persevere. I think that this is going to be a really fun time. I'm really impressed with Jake. I think he is a man of conviction. I've heard him speak to a number of these important issues here in Oklahoma. I want him to have the opportunity to speak to you. Hopefully there's time for him to answer some of your questions. And so I don't want to delay it. I think he's a fellow defender of the faith, the family, and the fellowship. All right, so give me just a moment. I'm going to get things set up here, and we're going to bring Jake in, and he's going to be able to introduce himself. All right, Jake, I believe the audience can hear you.
Good morning. How are you, Mark?
It's great to have you with us. I didn't know how soon that we were actually going to be able to make this happen, so I really appreciate you fitting me into your busy schedule.
Oh, no problem. This is what it's all about for me, and the opportunity to come on to speak to people on different platforms is just what it's all about. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, and I apologize. Whoa, that's kind of weird. Hold on, let me get this sorted out. There it is. This is my first time having an official remote guest, okay? So I'm gonna make some mistakes.
You gotta love that echo in the ear too. That's always fun.
Yeah. So with that, before we get into questions and discussing your approach to politics and your objectives as governor of Oklahoma, go ahead and give us just a quick background. What is the brief, 2-minute autobiography for Jake Merrick?
Absolutely. Well, it's always a challenge to fit it into 2 minutes. God has done so much in my life, but I was raised in a Christian family, thankfully, and was actually just sharing my testimony with my 10-year-old daughter yesterday about how I got born again. So that's always a neat experience to share that with your daughter. But thankful to be raised in a Christian family and was born again, baptized early at 6 years old. Felt called to the ministry at 14 years old. Didn't know what that looked like, but after talking with my pastor, he said, well, I think you should go to Bible school. So I went to Dallas Baptist University, did my undergrad there in biblical studies, and then went down the road after that to Southwestern Baptist Theological and did my Master's of Divinity. And after that, I was still saying, okay, God, what's next? And ministry for me has always looked different than I thought it would ever be. I love preaching and teaching the Word of God, and have done a lot of itinerant ministry, evangelism, and absolutely love that. I had a chance to teach as an adjunct professor for 4.5 years at Southwestern Christian University in Bethany. And that was an amazing experience, just teaching intro to Bible and intro to philosophy to first and second year students. But my ministry in general has always been a marketplace ministry, half the time in the pulpit, half the time out in the marketplace. So I was a personal trainer for 12 years. That was an incredible experience in ministry. Health and fitness is still very important to me. And it's an opportunity to help people achieve total transformation inside and out. My wife and I helped pastor a couple of different churches and felt called back in 2020 to come back to Oklahoma City. We thought it was to start prayer ministry around the state. And as we prayed into it, God really tapped me on the shoulder and I felt the urgency to run for office. And God really just confirmed that. And we dove in. I ran for Congress as my very first race. And that was quite the whirlwind experience. But Stephanie Baze ended up winning that race, went to DC. And then I ran for her state Senate seat that she vacated. and won that in a special election. So went on to serve in the Oklahoma State Senate. And then I lost my reelection. After losing that reelection, I was asking God, what's next? And he opened up an opportunity to host the Jake Merrick show on Freedom 96.9 FM. And I did that for the next 2.5 years, up until just last month when I left my show to go all in this campaign for governor. So that's kind of a big overview. I'm married 14 years to Nicole. She's got an incredible testimony, a strong woman of God. And then we have 2 daughters, Emmy, that we adopted when she was 5 out of DHS. And then our youngest, Adeline, who is 10. So Emmy's 16 and Adeline is 10.
Well, good job being concise there and giving us a good background. I do apologize. I'm trying to get this figured out. So on the YouTube right now, it seems to be either they're looking at me or they get this really doubled up vision there. So I'm trying to get this figured out as how to get that done. What I'm going to do is there's a button, folks, and that's always scary. But I'm going to try pressing the button and see if that fixes it for me. And it doesn't look like it will. But I'm trying to get to where I can have them be able to see you. So this is going to bother me, but I may just have to go back and forth, letting you talk and then putting you on screen, things like that. So just bear with me.
You're fine. I understand the pain, that technology.
Yes. And so I don't know what it wants from me in how to take this image right here and send it over to them. I guess if I did it, no, see, and then it duplicates it there as well. Okay, so with that being said, as I'm still trying to scramble to get yeah, I saw somebody mention picture in picture, and if I could get that to work, I would love to do it. But right now they just see me, Jake. When I do this, they get to see you, but it's that kind of funny image there. So we may just have to deal with that. I don't know. There's me. I don't know. So I can get myself to show up like this. It'll just be kind of weird. So I apologize. We're very professional around here.
Hey, gotta love it. Technology.
Yes. So one of the things that I was just really impressed about is you'll hear, especially in conservative states, politicians, they'll invoke scripture, they'll invoke church, they'll make statements concerning God, but it sounds a lot like lip service. It sounds like it's very surface level. And when I hear you speak on issues, I can tell that the Word of God, your faith is your foundation, and then everything else is built on top of that. And that's not something you can fake. That's only something that is able to be expressed if it's true. And so I really appreciate that about you. And what I want to do now is, I know that you want to fully explore a number of these issues and questions that people may have. So I want to give you as much time as possible, and then also hopefully our live audience who is with us. We're not huge, but we've got a number of people that watch. They may have some questions for you. So give me just a moment as I get ready to go through a list of questions here. So thank y'all for dealing with us as we're trying to get the camera situation working. First of all, here is, let's start with a hard-hitting one right off the bat.
Let's go for it.
I had a question sent to me. How would you handle the federal government granting amnesty to illegal farm workers? What happens if there are illegals that are working in the state of Oklahoma? Would you, as governor, be willing to assemble a task force to remove them? And this is going to lead us into other questions as far as state sovereignty, but I'm going to just start there and let you handle this question.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this issue of illegal immigration is obviously one that is concerning to me, to people in Oklahoma and across the nation, highlighted over the last 4 years under the Biden administration. We've had illegal immigration issues for a long time. And if we all remember back to 2016, this was the primary emphasis of Trump's campaign, was building the big, beautiful wall. And all of that was because we had an immigration issue. And but it was just exacerbated under the Biden administration, with clearly just wide open borders, allowing anyone and everyone to come through, claiming amnesty. And, no one really knows, I don't believe, the true count of how many came over, but it's in the millions. And so it has been refreshing and good to see President Trump, his administration, Tom Homan, aggressively working to clean this up and remove those who came over here illegally. Definitely a complicated issue. I think that's highlighted with Trump's recent move with the riots out in California. Right in the middle of that, he came out and announced that we could not remove all immigrants from our farms and hotel services and things like that, lest the farmers and these different companies go bankrupt. And so Trump, of course, got a lot of pushback on that. But I think it does highlight the complexity of this issue and how reliant we are on immigrant workers. And here in the state of Oklahoma, if you are in construction, then this is an issue you're going to deal with, is illegal immigrants. We are a nation of laws, and we must enforce those laws. As the pastor and someone who loves people, my heart goes out to those who are impacted by this, those who came over here seeking a better life for themselves or their families. But we have a process for them, and it's critical they abide by the process and by the law. And those who did not, there really is no other option except deportation. And so that must be enforced. Or we simply, what do we have if we do not abide by our own laws? We need assimilation. We need those who come over to speak English. And this is one of the problems that's highlighted even in our public education, is this struggle of teachers trying to deal with this influx of immigrants who speak not just Spanish, but a variety of languages. And they're trying to address that, as well as the English-speaking kids who are struggling to read and write themselves. And so that's just exacerbating our dilemma in our public school system. Most definitely, it is an issue that's impacting us all. There has been some movement over the last couple of years. Governor Stitt working on cleaning out our prison system, removing those illegals there that we can deport back, and those who have committed clear crimes above and beyond coming over here illegally, because we have to acknowledge coming over here illegally is breaking the law. But Governor Stitt's emphasis has been on those who once here have broken other laws, and that would be the initial target, to remove them first. And I don't disagree with that, but it needs to be more extensive. And we need to make sure that everyone here is here legally, which could include work permits. And so I welcome this look at work permits and school visas, school permits to come over here. But we see this pattern of those overstaying their visas or staying here working without a work visa. And that has to be cleaned up. And of course, we can look at those employers and those who are hiring and hold them accountable as well. And the question, I believe, I don't want to get too far from the question. I just wanted to take a big look to remind people of the greater issue of illegal immigration. But the main issue I think addressed in this question was this relationship between the state and the federal government, and what would we do as a state to address illegal immigration in Oklahoma. And that in itself is a complicated one. Even though I'm a huge state rights, state powers guy, I want to emphasize state powers and state sovereignty here in Oklahoma. the issue of immigration does fall to the federal government to as primarily responsible for it. I think in issues like this and others, I fought this issue even with abortion when we were trying to overturn Roe versus Wade. But in this issue particularly, I think we have to take great effort and strides to exert our state sovereignty and our state power to ensure those who are here in Oklahoma are abiding by the law of the land. And when they are not, if they're here illegally, we don't give them driver's licenses. We aid and assist the federal government in deporting them. And then the question is, can we go beyond that? Well, we did see movement over the last few years with states like Texas and even Florida busing immigrants to other states. And so I think that options are on the table for things like that. Maybe here in Oklahoma, we could bus them closer to the border, go and work with the federal government to load them up and take them out of the state. But currently, the way our system is set up is ICE is working in collaboration with our county sheriffs, with our state troopers and law enforcement in general. And just in my conversations with them, they are working with ICE to accomplish the goals of President Trump, of Tom Homan with immigration. And so I think that is currently in place in Oklahoma, and I would want to ensure that stays in place. And we continue to work with ICE to accomplish this goal of removing illegals out of the state of Oklahoma and ultimately out of the country. So I hope that answers that question, adequately. I know that this is a complicated issue. What adds to the complexity of it with regard to state sovereignty is simply this falling on the federal government, the issue of immigration falling on the federal government, similar to the issue with the tribes. Very complex situation because of a federal treaty and the limitations to which Oklahoma can act. But I think as far as we are able to, we should act aggressively and in collaboration with ICE. And as long as we have Trump and his efforts to clean up the nation, I'm going to be on board with that.
And I took you off for a second, Jake, of the screen. I'm trying another attempt at something to be able to have you. I would just assume if I could put you as the main focus here, and then I could just be off to the side. Let's see here. Okay, now I think what we have here, I hope, is going to be a better solution. But then again, I'm worried it may not. We'll see. Okay,
hey, we can always
I think that's much better, because now they're going to be able to see you, and they're going to be able to see me, and we don't have this massive duplicated thing. Okay. So I know what Jake sees, and you can't. I don't know if you can't even see me right now, can you?
I cannot. I can just see myself.
That's all right. So we'll get better at this. But Jake is going to be in full view for our audience. And this does bring us to this matter of the federal government versus the state sovereignty. And because the federal government is so large and it's got its hand in everything, the matter of illegal aliens being in the state, it's not as simple as just, well, here's the cut and dry answer. So how would you define state sovereignty? Before we move on, I want, in your words, your position what that means, state sovereignty.
Well, when in the original 13 colonies, they viewed themselves as nation states with equivalent power to any of the nations in Europe or around the world. So you had England, you had France, you had Virginia, you had North Carolina. And so independent sovereign states that were now united in a union. And we must remember the 10th Amendment granted certain powers to the federal government granted by the states, and that it had limited enumerated powers, and those powers not granted to the federal government were reserved then for the people and the states, according to the 10th Amendment. Now, we have a bit of a problem when it comes to the 14th Amendment and the way that during the Reconstruction Acts, and this we could go on for days talking about this, but during the Reconstruction Acts, they restructured America, not according to what it had been, but with a different structure. And so there's a big question then, does the 14th Amendment undermine the 10th in that it gives priority citizenship to the nation of America, and then also the state in which you reside by default? And that was a flip. That was a big flip, because previous to that, we were citizens of the state in which we reside, and then by default also a citizen, a member of the Union, of the United States. But our primary citizenship was the state in which we lived. With the 14th Amendment, it flipped that, and our primary citizenship then became to the nation of the United States of America. So we saw a move away from federalism towards nationalism, and that has been in place really since the late 1800s. And from there, we saw some very critical moves that continued to restructure our systems that aligned with this new structure. One of these was the undermining of the Second Amendment, actually, which redefined the militia. So the militia then was divided into the regulated and unregulated militia, with the regulated militia now being the National Guard, no longer under the direct authority of the state, but now under the direct authority of the federal government. So the governor can use the National Guard up to a certain point, as much as the federal government allows him. And then you had the unregulated militia, which is everyone else, where you're allowed to keep a firearm, depending on what state you're in, but you're not allowed to assemble and train in any organized way or militant way, as they would have in the beginning during the colonies. So you had local militias, and it was the local militias assembling together that fought the redcoats and they were the driving force of the Revolutionary War, is these militias. And so we are a very different country structurally than we were in the beginning. And this took some time for me to wrap my mind around this and to truly understand the implications of this when it comes to state sovereignty and state powers. But I believe my studies that it does confirm that during the Reconstruction Acts, our citizenship was flipped, and now the priority is given to our national citizenship over our state citizenship. We saw the restructuring of the militia, which I believe has taken authority away from the people in a very real and substantial way. And then, of course, with the creation and the implementation of the Federal Reserve and the fiat currency, all of this now under the federal oversight. There have been some critical changes. I point to the militia issue because I believe it highlights the crux of the issue, that authority was removed from the local community and now was given to the federal government, the National Guard now being the militia. And that was a great theft of authority by the federal government. Lots of background there. I don't think we have time to get into with the 13th and 14th Amendment, how that changed America. But to your question about state sovereignty, I believe we must contend for that place of sovereignty, that place of authority here in Oklahoma. And I was attempting to do that with abortion before Roe versus Wade was overturned with the Dobbs decision. I was in the Senate. I ran with a great emphasis on life beginning at fertilization, and with a distaste for incrementalism when it comes to preserving life. So most pro-life legislation would say we need to preserve all we can, but there's only so much we can do because of Roe versus Wade. Well, when it came to life and murdering life in the womb, my argument was twofold. We must do everything we can to protect life in the womb without saying our hands are tied because of a Supreme Court opinion. And we must exercise state sovereignty and push back against that. It was a great opportunity for us as a state to lead the way and be an example to the rest of the nation, but we didn't have those in leadership who had the backbone to do that. And so instead, what they did was killed all of my bills. Anything with my name on it, they said it's not going through. And then they recruited someone to run against me in my reelection. Because this was a big part of it, because of my stand for life and state sovereignty, this led me to vote against some pro-life bills because I was saying we're conceding. We're giving up state sovereignty, and we're conceding and compromising on our position that life is sacred from conception onward. I wanted to contend for that hard place, saying we must protect life. I believe life is sacred and it must be protected when life begins, not at some arbitrary number down the road. Is it 12 weeks? Is it 8 weeks? Is it 6 weeks? Somewhere in there, we should start protecting life. That was contrary to my fundamental beliefs. And if you ask most Oklahomans, I believe it's contrary to their fundamental beliefs. And so for that reason, I pushed back against a lot of pro-life legislation, and also for the reason of asserting state sovereignty. We as a state had an opportunity with abortion, with I think one of the most critical issues of dealing with life, to say we will not tolerate that in Oklahoma. We as a state defied the opinion of the Supreme Court, and we will decide we're going to protect life here in Oklahoma. This is what I was contending for when I was in the Senate, along with a small minority who had the backbone to do that. But I highlight that because I want you to know how much I believe in state sovereignty, even though I think it is a challenge because of what happened with the 14th Amendment and who we are as a nation today, with the emphasis on nationalism rather than federalism. I still want to fight that fight. And I will lead the way in saying we as a state must stand for righteousness. And if that means defying opinions of the Supreme Court, we'll do that. Now, that has a lot of implications, but on issues that matter, I believe those implications are worth it. The risk involved in flexing your muscle as a state and standing up for what is right. So, again,
I'm going to, Jake, they can't see you right now. They can only see me, which I guess doesn't really do anything because you can't see me. What I wanted to do was to actually let you be able to see me for a moment, because I know you did a lot of discussion there. Now Jake can see me. So Jake can see me. The live audience can't see me. This is a mess. Anyways, but I wanted to know, Jake, I'm nodding along with you on matters of state sovereignty, on the issue of the radical change that did take place in the government, the federal government, post-Civil War, the Lincolnian versus Jeffersonian view of government. And your situation voting and proposing bills at the state level, and it can be used as fodder against you that you're not pro-life when that's not the case at all. A similar situation was with Thomas Massey and the One Big Beautiful Bill. He was opposed to it on principle in a number of matters of spending. And yet, attached to that bill was the Hearing Protection Act, at least it was for a time, as well as the Short Act, which would remove silencers, short-barreled rifles off of the National Firearms Act, which is unconstitutional. And because he downvoted the bill, well, then a bunch of people claimed, well, Thomas Massie is not pro Second Amendment. And I'm not sitting here being an apologist for Thomas Massie necessarily. I'm just saying that's a very similar situation that we see here. So the amendments have been put in place. We've got the 13th, we've got the 14th. It has really stripped away so much of the original idea of a republic of states. And now we have this massive federal government. Before we switch gears on state sovereignty and some of these issues, what can we do? What power do we have to potentially nullify unconstitutional laws put forth by the federal government? What can we do in this current day and age with the laws as they are?
Well, I believe that the people of the original colonies must have asked this question with Great Britain. They were loyal to the crown up until their God-given rights were violated. And then, in the Declaration, they made it clear that whenever any of these governments are destructive to these ends of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. And we must always remember that. That's not some crazy left-wing, right-wing, whatever you want to call it, rhetoric. This is what our founding fathers said, and it's in our founding document of the Declaration of Independence. And so when we ask what is possible, I think that the true answer is found in what are you willing to fight for? Because I think that is what is possible. Of course, we want to do things lawfully. We want to do things according to the law and according to the Constitution. And the goal is not succession. It's not anarchy. It's none of that. But it is saying we're willing to challenge the status quo. And usually, here's what I found. Usually, it's a matter of money. It's a matter of dependency on the federal dollar. I bring this up with my time in the Senate. I went to Edmond Public Schools and I confronted the superintendent there, who was allowing boys to go into girls' bathrooms. I had a grandmother who was very concerned because her granddaughter was no longer going into the bathroom because there were boys in there. I went there, confronted the superintendent on it. She said, yes, we have to allow boys in the girls' bathroom because of federal money. And I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that was being allowed in Oklahoma. And I told her, I said, there's some things that are just not worth the money. And are you willing to sell out our daughters for more federal money? And they were. And I think we have to ask that question as a state. It really comes down to federal funding for all of these projects that we're so hooked on, that we would be more willing to push back if there was not the threat of losing federal funding for different things. So that, I believe, is the crux of the issue. And maybe there are some people who are willing to fight up until they realize the cost. And the cost may be that we lose federal funding in certain areas that could have a dramatic impact on the state of Oklahoma. But here's what I also believe, is that courage begets courage. And that if we as a state stood up, I believe other states would follow. I believe there are other people across the nation who are ready for this kind of leadership that they're not finding in their own state. So they might look to other states who are willing to do this. And when I say do this, I'm not sure exactly what that means. I think it may mean a different action depending on the issue. certain issues like abortion, I think righteousness requires us to stand. I don't know if we have any other option. If we claim to be followers of Christ and those who adhere to the truth, I don't think we have any other option but to stand, especially for life and protecting the innocent in the womb. So for me, it wasn't even an option. It was like, there's only one thing to do here, and that's to stand and to push back. I always use an extreme example of, okay, so what if one day someone like Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris is elected and, you know, beginning of the birth pains of the tribulation, maybe, but you have a crazy left-wing progressive who's elected and becomes president, appoints a whole new Supreme Court, and then they decide, you know what? The Bible is dangerous and we must burn all Bibles. And so there's an edict issued around the state that we must gather the Bibles and burn them. I'm using hyperbole here to make a point. But if that does come down, hey, they actually did say we can murder babies. And so I'm not sure it's that extreme, this example. But if it did come out that, hey, you know what? The Bible's a dangerous book. We must burn it. What are we as a state going to do? Say, well, I mean, Supreme Court said, gather up your Bibles. No, we would defy it, hopefully. There are certain lines we will not cross. And so we have to really weigh the cost and decide which issues are worth fighting, even if it means, you know, even if it means here as a state, we may suffer for a while. I mean, I don't think there's any way around it. If we lost federal money for highways, we have federal money going, you know, all over the place here in Oklahoma, in every state. What is the impact of losing that federal money, and is it worth the fight? And I think that in certain issues, it most definitely is. So this is not a light conversation or something I just want to rattle off, you know, possible scenarios. I want to think long and hard about this, pray over this, and even hear from others. I'm very curious to hear from you and from others around the state who say, you know, let's consider this. I was part of a group that for 2 years, we really dug into the 14th Amendment. And, you know, I learned a lot from men who had studied this more extensively than I had. And so humility requires you to acknowledge your own limits and to say, I need good advisors around me. When it comes to the issue of state sovereignty and what action we as a state might take, we have to have those that would prioritize freedom and prioritize righteousness in the land and have the backbone to push back against the federal government if necessary.
I've got to say, governors such as Ron DeSantis, Kristi Noem, when COVID hit and so many states shut down because Dr. Fauci told us to. Ron DeSantis, like I said, they serve as a great example, I think, of governors that said, no, we're not going to just bow the knee to what the federal government mandates, and we're going to stay open against those federal commands is about what they were.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we're looking for. That's what I'm looking for in a governor.
Yeah. You know, I mean, it's the prime example. That is the example of the day, I guess. I always refer to abortion because I believe we're talking about life and death and protecting the innocent. And, you know, I think that we still must continue that fight here in the state of Oklahoma. But yeah, COVID, I think, exposed a lot and really revealed those who had a backbone and those who understood freedom, the limitations of government. And yeah, the ones you gave, DeSantis and Noem, those who were willing to take a stand, eventually Stitt did, but initially he did not. And, you know, there was he gave a curfew for bars and restaurants. He was on board initially with the essential and non-essential businesses. So all of that was lunacy. It was a violation of our rights. And we have to be very clear on that. This is, of course, where the Benjamin Franklin quote is appropriate, that he who would give up essential liberty for any temporary safety is deserving of neither liberty nor safety.
That's such a good quote.
Yeah, I mean, so good and true. I got sick of hearing people say, be safe. It was all about safety, and to the point of trusting the government for our safety. But I always say that big government, small God, big God, small government. So I have a very big God that I trust. He's my provider. He's my caretaker. And I don't want nor need a big government to meet my needs or provide for me. So that's why we saw a very different America and a very different kind of government in the early colonies, where faith was an essential part of who they were. They just trusted God. They were farmers and ranchers. They had to trust God for their livelihood. So they were very adamant about a limited government, about federalism, about the provisions in the Constitution that secured and guaranteed their rights, and the right to be protected, in the role of government to protect these rights. So yes, I think COVID revealed a lot, and absolutely, I most definitely would stand against any federal edict that said we must give up our essential liberties for a little bit of temporary safety. It's not the role of government to do that. In fact, I've been saying, if elected to governor, there's some things I just won't do. And it seems to be the default tendency of elected officials to say, I will be the savior. Tell me what your need is and I will meet it. Because government is eager to meet any need you have. And of course, they're going to charge you for it on the back end with taxes by taking your money. But we need people in elected positions that understand it's not my role or my job or my duty to meet your need, to meet every need, to be your savior, to be your provider. There's going to be all kinds of calls from the public for government to intervene. Sometimes the government needs to do nothing and wait for the church to step in and wait for the people to take care of their own problems. So we have to beware of a Superman syndrome in those elected officials who are eager to come in and save the day, because that's going to lead to government overreach, and that's going to lead to a violation of freedoms.
I agree with you entirely. Before we leave this issue, because there are some key questions on education, and I know that you have a lot of passion in that area, and I want to give you time to explain and answer some questions there. But before we leave, take my position as I'm a 30-year-old man now, conservative, to kind of give you where my thoughts are, and I think a number of people that listen to this show, where they're with me. Trump is trying to think of how I want to word this. I voted for Trump. I support him. He is the man for the job right now.
Right.
With that being said, I see him as a Band-Aid and hopefully more of a first step to getting back to where we need to be. Trump came in and he was politically incorrect, which is one of his best qualities. We were tired of the ridiculous pandering and all the woke nonsense. Right. Trump is America first, and I know that you are an Oklahoma first candidate. And so these are all great things. And quite frankly, I think that he does a good job for where we're at. With that being said, we want to see the progression to be more state sovereignty, as we've said, and less Superman syndrome. Because Trump, to a number of people, is Superman. And as long as he is in office, everything's okay. The issue is Trump has issued a lot of executive orders. Yeah. And some of them, I may agree with them as far as what they're trying to accomplish, but some of them absolutely could be treading on state sovereignty. So we're in an interesting position. And the reason why you appeal to me as a candidate is because I do see you as the next generation, the next step, the next step towards getting back to an original idea of America and a republic. And so other candidates here in Oklahoma, and there's probably many around the country, seem just more status quo. They're going to continue to toe the big Republican platform. They're going to play nice with Trump, which play nice with him when you have good reason to, but they're not going to be a transitional or transformation type of person to get back to a smaller federal government, and which is why you seem to be a very appealing candidate to me.
You know, I was raised by an entrepreneur, and my dad was raised on a cotton farm, and you know, in South Texas, Big Spring, Texas.
We won't hold that against you.
When they had a breakdown, when their tractor broke down, you know, they couldn't just run to town and buy another tool. So they had to make their own tools. And this created a very, a mindset, a talent for seeing solutions and creating solutions in the engineering side of things. And so, you know, my dad didn't graduate high school, but he has lectured nuclear physicists and engineers on bolting in nuclear plants. Just crazy what God has done with him. He recently created the largest impact wrench in the world that's battery powered. So I was raised by a guy who didn't take no for an answer and was not stopped by problems, but saw himself as the solution and was eager to create the solution. And so that's just how I was raised. It's a mindset I have, that when you're confronted with a problem, you find the solution. And if there's not a solution, you create one. And like you said, with the other candidates, with most typical politicians, they only think one way, and they will default to the way they know and the path before them. And they're in this rut that they can't get out of, because this is just how they operate. They get into the political realm, and then they readily accept the advice of political consultants and political professionals. And all of that mindset creates this greater divide between politicians and the people. Because you have the political elite who really know best, and then you have everyone else. And we're going to come up with a path forward and let you know the path you should walk. And this seems to be the common trend in Oklahoma, in America. And people are just eager to take it back and become the government again and become the authority again. And I'm eager to see that. I am the counter candidate, the one that's counter to the political norm and willing to challenge the status quo. This is why I'm not taking any big PAC money or lobbyist money. I'm depending completely on individual donations from the people. I don't have a political consultant who's going to tell me and instruct me how to win. I know how to win. It's listening to and serving the people and prioritizing freedom and the Constitution. The path is easy. Okay, the way is hard because I got to overcome this financial burden, but I trust God with that, and I trust the people with that. And so, you know, to your point about willing to challenge the status quo, that's me 100%. And that's the way I operate in life. That's the way I was raised. And I think we have to think outside the box. I do agree that there needs to be a next generation of, I hate to even use the word politicians, but let's use the word public servants, of public servants coming into this role with a clear understanding of what it was all supposed to be about in the beginning and fighting to return to that place. That's what I'm about. And I believe even the younger generation of maybe 30 and under, maybe your generation, and even those, just graduating high school, just getting into college, thinking about who they are, I think they're reconsidering where we're at as a nation. And they're saying, you know what? I think it's time to go back to those fundamentals again. We're seeing a resurgence back to the Christian faith. We're seeing a resurgence of young men returning to conservative principles and joining the Republican Party. I think all of these are indicators that we as a people are deciding we've got to get back to some solid ground. We've been on shifting sand way too long. So, yes, I may not have the answers to every political issue, but this is the template I'm working with. And this is the foundation I'm standing on, is we've got to return back to the fundamentals, to truth, and those things that made America great in the beginning. I want to address the issue of Trump. I voted for Trump, love him. Maybe love's a strong word. I do believe God has set him in this role for this day. And one of the primary reasons is to be a wrecking ball, to disrupt things. And one of the things I'm seeing him do, although there's been other areas of question, like you said, with the example of the Federal Department of Education and the move to dissolve that.
Yes.
What he said is to return power back to the states. So I celebrate that, even though I don't like that terminology of the federal government allowing the states to do this once again. Again, I think that this is an issue where we as a state could have rejected federal money and just decided we're going to do that anyway. But since we're in this place, I do celebrate dissolving the Federal Department of Education, the states, again, taking this back. And I would like to see it go one step further, where local school districts decide what is best for their district and their kids.
Now, hold on, Jake. You're getting into the rest of the stuff here. No, that's great. That's exactly a question that I had for you, sent to me by a superintendent here in Oklahoma. And he wanted to know who should have the power in these public schools or in schools in Oklahoma. Should it be this state department or should it be the local school district? The school
local
board.
all the way. Local all the way. I was opposed to the bell to bell no cell, the state telling school districts what they can and can't do with cell phones. Now, my kids don't have cell phones. My 16-year-old, my 10-year-old, they do not have cell phones. So we read a lot. In our living room, we don't have a television. They have a family phone. They have an iPad that they are allowed to use. And so just to let you know where I stand on cell phones, okay, they have their place, beautiful technology, but they have their limitations and their boundaries too. So this is what we exercise in our home. We did have our 15-year-old, when she was 15, she was in public school, a small country school down the road from us. We thought we would try it out. Well, I was so disappointed to see that teachers would teach a half a class and then give them a Chromebook as a babysitter the rest of class. And so how did we deal with this? Well, I went straight to the school and I talked to the principal and I talked to the teachers and I said, my daughter will not be getting a Chromebook. Okay. So you can give her some extra worksheets. She can read, but you're not going to give her a Chromebook to babysit her the rest of the class period. And they listened. A couple of times they didn't, and I had to go back up there and say, listen, I'm not going to tell you again. So this is when I talk about parental authority. We must prioritize parental authority over our children, but also parents need to exercise that. In the same way we're talking about states flexing their muscles with the federal government, parents need to do that with their own schools. Don't wait on permission. Go up there and demand what will and will not happen with your child. If they don't obey, you take them out. Okay, so do what you have to do as a parent to protect your children. I know I'm kind of all over the place, but it's all connected. But parents are the most local authority that have the ultimate authority over their child. I don't believe in co-parenting with the government. And I believe the local school districts should have the ultimate say of what happens with those children. In those local school districts should be listening to the school board, who are listening to the parents who elected them. So we must remember who is the ultimate authority and who to hold accountable. But I do believe in the local control. I did not like the bell-to-bell no cell because I wanted local school districts and even teachers in their own classrooms to decide what's best for their classroom. I want to see teachers have ultimate authority. I say ultimate authority, the parent has ultimate authority, but the teachers to have authority over their own classroom. And if there is disruptions, if there's unruly kids, they should have the authority to tell them to leave so they can get back to focusing on education. Right now, we're seeing a lot of administrative pushback where teachers are told they can't suspend students, they can't tell them to leave the classroom, and they're forced to allow this disruption to happen in school. Teachers need to have control over the classroom. Superintendents and local school districts should have control over their districts and their schools. Let's have some general guidelines at the state level, but not dictating the details of what happens in every school.
Yeah, I think that you have a great approach to that matter. I'm switching this over to where hopefully you can see me for a second here, Jake. There we go. So you maybe see me. All right, so I can see me and Jake split screen here. Sorry for all of you who are watching. You're just having to look at me for a moment. But what I wanted to do really quickly is get to a question here on just public schools in general. So what is your approach to public schools? Many of our rural Oklahomans are employees at public schools. When you think about these little towns, Batiste, Oklahoma, that's one that comes to mind, right? I don't know how many people have even heard of Batiste, but it's there. Half, maybe, of the people that live there are involved in that school in some way. Either it's the kids that go, right. Mom teaches, dad's a coach, dad's a bus driver, something. One of the issues that's come up with the current administration, Ryan Walters, does seem to be a bigger school, consolidation mentality, private school promoting. And I'm not anti-private school by any means. But what I'm saying is, you're in the position as a Republican candidate for governor, and you need the votes of these small town teachers.
Yeah.
What is your message to them? And if we need massive change for public schools, or maybe we don't, we're going to let you express and walk through your position. What is your message to them? Because it's a very important issue, I think. We nearly had a Democrat state superintendent, and nearly is maybe a bit of a stretch, but Joy Hoffmeister, she had a pretty strong showing for a state that's so red, and that's because public school teachers in droves came out against Ryan Walters. So I'm just going to give you now the ball's in your court to discuss it. I'm going to go back to your screen so you'll just see you, but that's why I do it, so they can see you.
Yeah, no worries. And I'll tell you where I stand on this without a vote in mind. So again, I'm looking at what I believe is a good fix, and I'm open to criticism and solutions. But again, not doing this to try to earn votes. I'm doing this because I believe it's right. And then if you agree with this too, you can get on board and you can get behind me in this campaign. But yes, 100% our schools are broken and need to be fixed. We just have to look at the academic performance, and that tells the story, I believe. So with the dismal academic outcomes, we have to have kids that are graduating that can, we've got to get beyond this low bar we're setting of we have to teach kids how to read. That needs to be established in like third grade. Okay. Personally, our kids, they are avid readers. I told my wife years ago, I have no concerns about our children's future because they know how to read. They can access information. They have a hunger for it. They can assimilate it. They can process it. They can think critically. So even if we stopped educating today, I'm confident that they would still be successful. That's how important reading is. And reading should be established early on and then built on. But we're seeing kids graduate high school without proficient reading levels. And I'm concerned about where we end up 10 years from now when these kids get out there in the real world and they can't find jobs or they become subpar employees, whatever it may be. But we must emphasize reading. We must emphasize those core skills and put academics at the forefront of why they are there. I do not have a goal of trying to reach 50% reading proficiency. We need to be at 100% reading proficiency as a base level, so then we can build on that to go into learning other languages. We can go into learning critical thinking and debate and becoming leaders in the nation and the world. Okay. The goal is not to just barely get by. And that's kind of the mentality I see across the state is what do we need to do to just pass kids? What do we need to do to get up to 50%? That's a losing mentality. We got to be at 100% reading proficiency for every kid in Oklahoma. And then we need to talk about how to go beyond that, how to build on that foundation. So that's my starting point. How do we make that happen? Well, I think standardized testing and teaching to the test is detrimental to education. You're not teaching kids how to think critically and how to learn and how to be leaders. Okay, you're teaching them how to get by. So I do not like standardized testing. I think we need to look at models that can customize education to kids' strengths. After they've established these foundational principles, then how do we then help them develop in their natural propensities, their natural strengths, so that they're not just good workers. I don't like the idea of preparing kids for the workforce. I want to prepare kids to be good employers, to be innovators, entrepreneurs. Okay, this is where I want to take education. So here's a couple of starting points. Administrative bloat. I'm talking with several superintendents right now, okay, in my area about this very issue. I just had one reach out yesterday saying, hey, can we go to lunch? And I agreed to go to lunch because I'm interested in this topic. But when we have 4 superintendents in the state making more than the president of the United States, and we have 17 superintendents making over $250,000, not including their staff, when we have less than 50% of appropriated educational funding going to the classroom, we have a major problem, a money problem, not in that there's not enough money, but where is this money going? And if it's not going to the students and the teachers to improve academic performance, I think we have our priorities wrong. Now, these superintendents who are making the big bucks, if they were producing blue ribbon schools, if they were producing A+ schools, you wouldn't really hear any complaints. Like, keep on paying them. They're doing a great job. But they're not. They're producing failing scores, failing schools. So this puts everything into question. So I would start there. I'm not a fan of consolidation. I would like to keep the independence of the individual schools. But I think a possible path forward is this was actually suggested to me. I think it has some viability. Is looking at the possibility of having a superintendent over a certain population. So say 30,000 kids. So you have a superintendent over 30,000 kids. Now, in some areas of the state, that might encompass multiple counties. In other areas, it might be an entire county. In metro schools like Oklahoma City and Tulsa, you might have 2 or 3 superintendents that are breaking up that student population within one school district. So I think that may have some viability there of reducing the number of superintendents and equally dispersing them over the state with equal pay because they're overseeing the same number of students. But equal pay doesn't have to be a necessary part of that equation. But I think that is a possible path forward. Dealing with the administrative bloat, we have over 500 superintendents, 500 school districts, over 500 superintendents making these six-figure salaries. We've got to rethink that of where the money is going. That's one starting point for me. Another one is looking at, like I said before, teachers having power and authority over their own classroom. So we have a lot of trauma across the state. We have kids coming into classrooms that are dysregulated. They're not able to learn because of what they're bringing into the classroom. And there's an attempt to offer more services to meet those other needs that are kind of outside the scope of education. I'm not a fan of that because these wraparound services are moving schools away from their intended focus of education. I want to keep the focus on learning to read and write and arithmetic, not meeting these social emotional needs. There's a place for that. I don't believe it's in the schoolhouse. We need to recognize the need, maybe have a good referral program to counselors and chaplains and such like that. But that's not the place for the public school. We need to focus on education and then give teachers the power to remove unruly students so they can focus on those who are both able and willing to learn in the classroom. That alone is going to bring up the academic outcomes. Okay. Now we need to help these kids, and we'll talk about that in a separate discussion, but I'm talking about how do we improve academics. That's one, is we need to give teachers the power to remove these unruly students who can't or are unwilling to learn. Those are two starting points for me, is this administrative bloat and addressing authority in the classroom without administrative pushback. And, and again, addressing this cookie cutter standardized education we're offering to the students. I think it's about on par with the kind of meals we're offering to students, which we also have to address. I think we have to improve health and wellness in our schools, which will also improve their ability to focus. So I'm on board with this presidential fitness test and the MAHA movement to improve health and wellness across the state of Oklahoma. I think that will also help improve academic performance in our schools.
Yeah. So I think I'm trying to be maybe a mediator between you and the standard public school teacher, things like that. Because I do have some insight. I was a teacher for 5 years. I was a coach, and I saw a lot of the problems that you've addressed. So there's a lot of things that you've spoke of there that I think a lot of teachers are saying, and superintendents, they're saying amen. They're tired of having to deal with these standard testing, the pressure to meet the word I'm looking for, the curriculum to teach to the test, so they don't get to explore other areas that they would find of value. Getting the authority back to the local school district and the teacher's classroom. Let the teacher handle the classroom, manage that issue, and then, of course, it ends at the authority of the parents. Yeah. They're all going to be on board with you. I think the vast majority of teachers in Oklahoma and superintendents really do appreciate that. And I want to see you succeed. I want to see you succeed. Okay, that's that echo in my ear messing with me.
Help me out.
I do think a challenging sell is going to be the idea of limiting superintendents. Maybe not salary so much, but limiting superintendents. Because if we talk about appointing a single superintendent over a certain population, it's not just the superintendent, but it's also that superintendent's secretary and it's also other people that may work in that office and serve a role. And Oklahoma, a rural state, these, like I said, these smaller towns, the school is the source of livelihood for a lot of people. Now, I'm not saying that's the perfect way things should be, but that's how it is. So for you to get the support of these small town rural teachers, administrators, I think they like a lot about your approach to school sovereignty, if we want to use that term.
Right.
And then I think there will be some concern about, hold on, if I vote for Jake Merrick for governor, am I going to lose my job? Right? So I'm just trying to give you, as somebody who is, I've got you on the show, I want you to do well, trying to give you some thoughts here to consider as that you may come across as you engage with people.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a valid point. I have as my starting point the educational outcomes, right? I mean, so that's what we're focusing on is how do we improve the academic outcomes in our schools and what is necessary for that? And, it becomes a difficult thing when you again think about the dynamics in small towns. I was raised in small towns. I'm talking about multiple towns. One of them was Guthrie, Texas, which had a population of about 400, right? Small ranch town, K through 12. I guess there were about 300 kids in the K through 12 that I was in.
Still had football, right?
Years.
Still had football?
We had six-man football.
Yep, there you go. Oklahoma would just play fall baseball, but Texas is going to have a football team.
That's it. So just to let you know, I was raised in these small towns and currently live in Tuttle, which is a growing small town. But, I sympathize with and understand the dynamics in these small towns where, much of life is centered around the local public school. I mean, not much else is going to happen on Friday evening if you have a Friday football game. And so I get that. But you have to, for me, I mean, the priority is the performance, is the education of our children. I don't want to sound harsh or callous or anything like that, or even lose votes, obviously. But that is my starting point. If it means jobs are lost or shifted, whatever we have to do, currently our model is not working. So what do we have to do to shift that model? I'm not in favor of anybody losing their job, but I think we have to make sure the priority can't be like, okay, we have to make sure nobody loses their job.
And you did make the point, I don't want to overlook it. You addressed particularly failing school systems. And where it's not like we're gonna go to small town Oklahoma, they're performing well, they're not underwater financially, at least they're managing their budget. We're not going after them. That's not our concern, as you voiced earlier.
And I think that most, I don't know if I can say most or not, but I believe that we see higher outcomes, better academic outcomes in our rural communities, simply because you have a lower student to teacher ratio and you have more parental involvement. So those are tremendous factors in helping to improve academic outcomes. Now, that's not always the case. I mean, we've been in some small schools that, were awful, to be honest. But it really comes down, I believe, to leadership in those schools and those that are going to say, you know what, we are really going to prioritize education here, and we're not going to just get by. And here's the thing. One of the things I want to do is create a citizen advisory board that would bring in experts from various fields so that when elected as governor, I can still sit before the people and get feedback as far as what's working and what's not. One example of that is a lady I had talked to just recently who was a spouse of a military member who had died. And she asked me, do you know how spouses of deceased military members, of veterans, are treated in Oklahoma? And I said, to be honest, I don't. And so I said, I need to learn from you. So I'm going to get together with her and hear her story and learn how we can do better in that area. Well, the same is true in multiple areas, but also in our public school. I want to sit with superintendents and teachers and say, okay, what's working and what's not? But something has to change. We agree with that. So let's find a solution instead of just keep on beating the same drum.
Yeah. Well, as a 5-year teacher, there were times when I was told, you cannot give this student a 0. It doesn't matter that they didn't try. It doesn't matter that they turned it in 3 months late.
Right.
We cannot give out 0s because it hurts the kids' I don't know, feelings. You can't do that.
And,
yes, and also I'm a single person, so my experiences will vary. I taught at a 3A school, and I taught at a Class A school. I also taught at a Class B school for a little bit. But the 3A school operated much more, I feel like a smaller school. And the Class A school was almost trying to copy the format of larger schools. And I felt that the 3A school did a lot better. And so.
Right. No, I think it's so individualized, depending on that particular school and, the leadership there. Something that is related to schools and leadership that I'm talking a lot about, I think a lot of people around the state are talking about, is the protecting children from sexual predators in the school. And we have to make sure that those who are there are not only qualified, but they're also not preying on our children. And this is a big priority for me and for others. I know that this conversation is only growing in the state, but we need to make sure that our children are protected at that level as well.
Yes. And I've also heard you speak to the matter of DHS and so many problems that persist. I've seen it personally in multiple communities. It's almost as if DHS only, it seems like they go after the people that haven't done anything, and then they overlook the massive amount of abuse that takes place within the foster system and so many other areas.
Yeah, we adopted our oldest daughter out of DHS, and we fostered her for 2 years from ages 3 to 5, and then adopted her. She came with tremendous amount of trauma from those first 3 years of life, a lot of neglect and abuse, and that she still is working on overcoming today. So we're very familiar with that, but we were very disturbed going through that 2 years of fostering, seeing the dysfunction in the system in DHS. And not much has improved since then over the last 13 years. So there's lots of claims that it has improved, but, we still have about 6,000 kids in foster care. We still are seeing kids flounder in the system until they age out, where then they often go to the streets or to shelters, or they become addicted. They have no stability. So we have a long way to go when it comes to child welfare in the state. And let's just start with the responsibility of local communities and churches. That's where the burden must fall. Is we must remember that it was always intended for the church to care for the widow and the orphan. This is always the church's primary responsibility. And then the states. But DHS and child welfare in general is a relatively new concept when you look at the history of our nation. And we have to ask the question, do we even need it? That's a big question to ask, but let's go ahead and start at the foundation. Do we even need it? What is the role of the church and the communities? And how have we abdicated our responsibility and deferred it to the state? The state will always do it subpar. When I first walked into DHS, I said, I hate this place. It's the state's solution to a spiritual problem. And there was just rampant brokenness in these families and in the system. first thing I would do is appoint someone at the head of DHS who is serious about extensive reform in the system. Next thing I would do is remove any financial incentive to remove children from their homes. I give this example. If you're paying cops to arrest criminals, I bet you the number of criminals is going to go up. They're going to find people that are breaking the law, whether it's the truth or not, right? So the last thing we want is to incentivize cops financially to go and find criminals, because they're going to find criminals whether they're there or not.
Yes.
And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of in DHS. They are financially incentivized to remove children from homes. Sometimes those kids need to be removed, but oftentimes they do not need to be removed, but it's a financial deal for the state. That needs to stop. If a child needs to be removed, it needs to be because it's the safety of the child we have in mind, not the financial benefit to DHS.
And then the child may be subjected to worse treatment by the hand of a foster parent, quote unquote, who is just using the child as a paycheck.
Most of the time, yeah. And then good luck to those biological parents in getting that child back.
Yeah.
So once they're in the system, it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible for the bio parents to get that child back and to have any authority in the court system. Everything is working against them. And it is a major blight on the state of Oklahoma. It must be fixed.
It's a tragedy what's going on. Yeah. And I'm glad that you're speaking out about it and getting more people in tune with it. So thank you for that. How are we doing on time?
Good. I probably have about 10 more minutes before I have another appointment.
Okay. I was looking at, I'm doing multiple things at once. I've got my phone keeping track of the chat, and people just seem to be very attentive to listening. We do have a comment here. This is from my mother, actually. She is a longtime school teacher and coach.
Yeah.
She says, the paperwork and reports that a superintendent has to do is crazy, not to mention hiring, overseeing staff, and maintaining positive community relations. As a retired public school teacher of 33 years, 100% reading proficiency in the best of situations is next to impossible. So there's somebody's real life experience on the ground there, trying to be unbiased because it's mom.
Exactly. And hey, it's the highest bar. It's not just a high bar, it's the highest bar. Okay. So I get that. And as I say, shoot for the moon, you'll hit the stars. And so I'm all about, let's go ahead and let's raise that bar high. And I exercise this in exercise, even as a personal trainer, helping people push to improve their strength and their physical fitness. I'm going to find out what their max is. Okay. We're going to load it up, and I'm going to push you to exhaustion to find out where your limit is. And then we can work off of 60 or 70% of that max. Now, we need to find out where the limits are in education, and have we truly pushed to find those limits, or are we simply just kind of floating and surviving? I want to raise that standard as high as we can, even improving the physical wellness of our students. I would encourage everyone, go on YouTube, just look for La Sierra JFK.
Yeah, I saw when you showed that video.
Check that out and compare that to the physical wellness and fitness of our students today. We might say today that's impossible, but it's not impossible if it happened before. And it did happen before in this nation. I want to see Oklahoma return to that kind of physical fitness standard. And I think if we can do that, that's going to improve our academic outcome as well.
Yeah. No, and I think they can understand that. Having a high goal, and then if we achieve 60, 70% of that goal, there's a certain politician who's known for saying, this is the greatest deal in the history of deals, quite frankly.
That's right.
But no, we do appreciate it. And like I said, I would encourage you, as you are carrying out your campaign, you have to balance what is best for Oklahoma, what's the best for education, but also the reality that you and we are inheriting this situation where a large number of our citizens are employees of the state, in the form of being a teacher. And so it's gonna impact them. I think they're going to be so much behind you in a number of important issues. So I know it's a challenging thing to balance, but talk to them, have conversations with them. I know you are having conversations with them. So keep it up, because I think that you can accomplish a lot with them. As we're winding down, you're running out of time. I did have a few other things. One thing I like about you is you're a gym guy. You think physical fitness is important. Let's see here. How much do you bench?
It has been a while since I've actually maxed on a bench, just to protect my shoulders. And so
yeah, I understand.
My goal now is like what's the max push-ups I can do? And so
there we go.
I'm working on a lot of body weight, functional fitness.
Yeah.
And really enjoy that.
When's the last time you got to do a roll in the gym in jiu-jitsu?
Oh man, I was actually thinking about that this morning. It's my gaps are too far, so it's hard to advance a belt whenever I'm not consistent in there. But
yeah.
It was actually a couple months ago that I went and enrolled at a friend of mine. He has a gym, Black Flag Jiu-Jitsu, and so I've got that on my radar, man. I love it. It's an amazing workout. It's great mental discipline as well, and I love jiu-jitsu. So
I'm a 7-year white belt myself.
Are you okay? Yeah.
I tell you what, if you come to Durant, and I know that Evan wants to do something for you, so be on the lookout for him reaching out to you.
Yeah.
There's a gym called Kingdom Grappling. And if I would imagine if a gubernatorial candidate went in there and rolled with some guys, that would probably go a long way. Keep on the lookout for that.
That would be awesome. I would love to do that. Kingdom Grappling. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah. Cale Bryant is the black belt. Or no, he may be a brown belt. He's a brown belt right now, but he'll be a black belt soon enough. We were both white belts at the same time early on. And I actually got him. I got him with an Americana back in the day. But I went more the gun route, and he stayed more jiu-jitsu route. So
nice. Well, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I apologize for some of the issues we've had, kind of the funny screen, and you not really being able to see me for the large portion of it. We'll get better at it. I'm going to get this figured out. The good news is the audio all went through great. They were able to hear you. They were able to see you. And I really do appreciate it. I think your Oklahoma first mentality, state sovereignty, and it's not a secular view. It's a biblical view. That's your foundation. I can tell when you speak that it's genuine. You're not using it for grandstanding. I think it's what Oklahoma needs. And as the months go forward, I hope that we can do this again. I'd love to get an update with you so more people can hear how you're doing. I know there'll be more people watch. That they'll watch the live. We've had, I don't know, dozen to anywhere to 20 or so people, I think, tuning in live. But then we'll have more watch it later. So I hope you found it worth your time to swing by and visit with us for a while.
I did. I really appreciate the invite, and I would love to do it again, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, if you would, stick around for just a second when we close out the show so I can say bye to you without having to be on the show. But just stick around, stay on camera for a moment, and then I'm willing to give the send out to the audience.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mark.
All right, thanks. Give me just a second. All right, everybody. So that was Jake Merrick. He is running for governor here in Oklahoma. I think that he is a man of conviction. I think you got to hear him speak to these issues. And if you want to reach out to him, actually, you know what, Jake, you still with us?
I am, yes.
Okay, I made a mistake. I was going to do this. If people want to find you and they want to donate to your campaign, give them the information.
Yeah, you can go to jakemerrickforgovernor.com. And the 4 is the FOR, not the number 4, jakemerrickforgovernor.com. And there's a link there to donate. Just hit that. We're depending on individual donations for this campaign, so it'd be greatly appreciated.
All right, there you go. I think you'll be seeing him. We're going to probably have to have him on again sometime, if nothing else, to talk about physical fitness. That may be a fun conversation for next time.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, hey, thanks, Jake. Once again, stick around, and I'll see you again in a second.
Okay.
So with that, thank you all for joining us today here at Shields and Arrows. I'll remind you, tonight we're going to be studying Abraham, Finding the Biblical Truth, and that will be going live at 6:30 at the church, and so back to the normal Bible study schedule. And with that, we will see you all tomorrow, of course, with Theology Thursday, where I spend the whole hour just answering your theology questions. This has been Shields and Arrows. Let me turn down the volume because that's probably really loud due to the talking. Sorry to blow out your eardrums. But thank you all so much. I am Pastor Mark Baze. Really appreciate each and every one of you. Hopefully you go check out Jake Merrick. Go to his YouTube channel. He has a live show. And listen to him. Talk about politics in Oklahoma. Thank you all so much.